I froze at the doorway. Her voice hissed through the phone. "Her room stinks. I can't take it anymore." Papers rustled, drawers slammed. Her heels clicked furiously across the floor. Then came the words that shattered me. "It's time. A nursing home." My own daughter plotting my exile. How could I survive this betrayal? If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you, silently arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment saying amen below this video, because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. I was not trying to listen. That morning, I was only walking down the hallway to refill my cup of tea, moving carefully the way I have since the stroke last year. My slippers made no sound on the hardwood floor. I was holding a chipped porcelain mug, steadying it with both hands. I passed by the kitchen, and that is when I heard my daughter's voice. Kate was pacing barefoot across the tile, a phone pressed to her ear, one hand slicing the air like she always does when she is worked up. She didn't lower her voice. I didn't even glance toward the doorway. She didn't notice me at all. She says, "My room stinks." Kate laughed, a short, clipped sound that didn't sound like my daughter. "It's heavy, like old fabric, like a nursing home smell. I sprayed the whole bottom floor, but it clings to everything." I stopped mid-step, my hand trembled, and the mug wobbled dangerously before I caught it with my other palm. The words sank into me like a slow, cold weight. Not anger, no. Something quieter than that. Something heavier. My heart didn't speed up. It slowed, as if it knew it had just been struck by a truth too sharp to deny. I backed away from the doorway, quiet, deliberate. When I returned to the room, they let me stay in the guest room. They called it. I closed the door softly behind me. Not to hide. No, it was more like closing a wound too raw to leave open. I set my tea on the dresser, beside the neat stack of my nightgowns and vitamins, and the small silver frame that holds Kate's picture from when she was 7. Her 2 front teeth were missing, her hair in uneven pigtails. She had begged me that day to sing just one more lullaby before bed. I stared at that photo for a long time. How could the child who once pressed paint-stained fingers into my palms, who used to cry when I left for the night shift at the hospital, I grow into a woman who laughed about her mother's smell? Now, when she thanks me for folding the laundry, she sounds more like a neighbor being polite than a daughter speaking to her mother. 3 months ago, I turned 78. 2 weeks after that, I had the stroke. It was not dramatic, but it left me unsteady in the mornings. My daughter came right away. "You shouldn't be alone. Mom, you'll stay with us until things settle." That was her promise. I agreed because I trusted her, because I wanted to believe there was still a place for me in her home. But slowly, things shifted. My chair disappeared from the living room. My tomato pots were moved behind the shed. My name vanished from the Wi-Fi password note on the fridge. I became the quiet hum in the background, the folded towels, the hot tea, the babysitter for Ethan and Emily when schedules grew tight. And now, I had become a smell, something unpleasant that clung to the house no matter how much she sprayed. I sat in the armchair by the window and looked out at the roses I planted last spring. Their edges were dry and brittle from too much sun, but they were still there, still trying, just like me. I reached into the closet and touched the pink linen dress that still hung in its garment bag. I bought it 5 years ago, a retirement gift to myself, a soft collar, delicate pleats, pearl buttons down the front. I had imagined wearing it to Sunday brunches with friends, maybe in a quiet cafe, with sunlight slanting through tall windows. But the brunches never happened. The friends either passed on or moved away, and now the dress still waited, untouched, as if it too had been put aside in someone else's house. When I left my condo to move in here, I thought I was choosing family. I thought I was investing in a shared home. I sold the condo, gave my savings to help with the down payment, let Kate's name go on the mortgage. At first, it felt like belonging. I baked muffins. I watched the children. I paid the water bill without being asked. But little by little, my boxes were moved to the garage. My voice was no longer part of decisions. Even the thermostat seemed off limits without permission. And then today, I overheard my daughter tell someone my room stinks. She didn't whisper it. She didn't soften it. She just said it like a fact. That is the moment, I think, when something inside me began to shift. Not in anger, though I would have every right to feel it. Not in despair, though heaven knows it would have been easy to sink into that. No, it was something different, a spark, tiny but steady, a reminder. I am Margaret Hayes. I worked 40 years as a night shift nurse at Memorial Hospital, welcoming babies into the world, holding the hands of those leaving it. People trusted me with their first breaths and their last words. I built a home with my late husband, James. I raised a daughter, and I poured my strength into giving her every chance. I am more than a burden. I am more than an old woman in a borrowed room. And if my daughter sees me as nothing more than a smell to be covered up, then maybe it is time I begin to see myself again. That was the day I decided something had to change. Life has a way of shrinking you without your permission. At first, it happens so quietly, you hardly notice. A chair moved from the living room because there's more space without it. Boxes carried out to the garage just until we figure out storage. My name left off the Wi-Fi password note on the fridge, because it's already written down somewhere. It sounds small, doesn't it? Harmless. But when enough small things are removed, a person begins to wonder if she herself is next. Richard, my son-in-law, is not unkind, but he is absent even when he is standing right there. Most mornings, I find him in the kitchen making coffee before work. The machine hisses. He scrolls his phone, eyes lit by some urgent message. I'll say, "Good morning, Richard. Looks like a beautiful day." And he'll nod without looking up. Morning. Then his phone dings, and he walks away with his coffee. Conversation over. I tell myself it isn't malice. It's simply modern life. He works in finance, something to do with renewable energy investments, and he carries the weight of 1,000 numbers in his pocket. I know what it means to be consumed by work. I was a nurse for 4 decades. I have forgiven him 1,000 small slights, but even forgiveness cannot warm cold stares. The children Ethan and Emily are growing faster than my heart can keep up with. Ethan is 15, his limbs long and awkward, headphones always draped around his neck like armor. He used to crawl into my lap with his picture books, pressing his little hand against my cheek when I did the funny voices. Now he mutters, "Hey, Grandma," without looking up from his phone. Emily is 12, balanced on that fragile edge between childhood and whatever comes after. Last year, she still asked me to braid her hair before school. Now, when I walk past her room, the door clicks shut. Last week, I overheard her whispering to a friend, "I can't have anyone over. My grandma's staying with us." It's complicated. It wasn't complicated when I stayed up all night helping her build a science fair volcano. It wasn't complicated when I paid for her summer camp. But children learn what they see, and what they see is their mother stepping around me, as if I am a piece of furniture she isn't sure she should keep. I try to make myself useful, to remind them of the ways I can still contribute. I bake muffins, banana bread, to lemon cookies, the recipes they used to love. I place them on the counter, still warm, just as the kids come down for school. But now they reach for protein bars wrapped in plastic, cold things meant to be eaten in the car. One morning, I set out a plate of blueberry scones, golden and fragrant. Kate walked in, scrolling through emails on her phone, a travel mug in her hand. "Mom, you're up early." "I made scones," I said, a little too hopefully. She glanced at them. "We're trying to cut carbs." She smiled, polite but distracted. Already halfway out the door, the scones sat untouched. Later, I wrapped them in foil and tucked them into the freezer beside the banana bread. The muffins, the meals I had cooked and frozen for them when they went away for the weekend. They had not told me until the night before that they were leaving. "It'll just be easier this way," Kate had said. That night, a candle appeared on the table outside my door. One of those designer candles, minimalist label, clean linen scent. When I asked, Kate smiled tightly. "Don't take it personally." "Mom, sometimes the hallway feels a little stuffy, but I did take it personally." I took it personally when they closed the pantry door while I was still reaching for the oatmeal, when they re-washed the dishes I had already cleaned, when my offers of help were met with that smile, the one that says no without saying the word. I began showering twice a day, scrubbing until my skin was pink. I washed my nightgowns daily, hung them to dry in the bathroom so they would not mix with the family's clothes. I told myself I was only being careful, but inside, I felt the slow erosion of my dignity. And then Ethan, my sweet, awkward grandson, broke the silence. It was late. I had woken from another restless night and gone to the kitchen for tea. Ethan stood by the refrigerator, the light spilling over his thin frame. He was making a sandwich, spreading peanut butter in neat strokes, the way his mother once did at his age. "Hey, Grandma," he said, startled. "Want one?" "No, thank you, dear." "Used tea?" He nodded, concentrating. Then, without looking up, he muttered, "Mom's been weird lately. Stressed about the house. She keeps saying we need to present well because of Dad's promotion." He rolled his eyes, so like Kate used to when she was 15, that it hurt to see. "I think your mom just wants everything to be nice," I said gently. "Yeah, but..." He hesitated, then closed the refrigerator. "Never mind. What is it?" "Ethan," he sighed, shoulders sagging under a weight no boy should have to carry. "I heard her talking to Dad. About you. About putting you in a home, like a Cara place. She said it would be better for everyone." The kettle began to whistle, a high, thin sound. My hands did not feel like my own as I reached to turn it off. "I see," I said softly. "Because what else could I say?" "I told her it was messed up," Ethan said quickly, fiercely. His mother's eyes flashed with protectiveness. "I said your family." I reached for him, this tall boy who had once curled into my lap for bedtime stories. I hugged him, and for a moment, he let me. "Thank you," I whispered. He hugged me back, quick and awkward, then grabbed his sandwich and disappeared upstairs. I never made the tea. I sat in the dark kitchen, staring at the silent kettle, feeling the weight of every home I had built, every life I had touched, every person I had cared for. And now, I was being spoken of as an inconvenience to be managed, a problem to be solved. That night, I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling. My mother's quilt lay heavy across my legs. I thought about the candle outside my door, the frozen scones in the freezer, the tomatoes struggling for light behind the shed. I thought about my daughter's laughter in the kitchen, sharp and foreign, as she described me as a smell. And I realized something with a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. If I stayed in this house, I would disappear. Not in death, no. Worse than that, I would vanish piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a polite nod, a faint odor, a plate of uneaten muffins. I had given them everything. My savings, my time, my care. I had sold my own condo to help them secure this very house. I had trusted that in return, I would belong. But belonging cannot be begged for. It must be offered freely. I closed my eyes and whispered into the darkness. "I am not finished yet." It was the first time in a long while that I had spoken a promise aloud, not to them, to myself. And that promise would change everything. When you spend a lifetime caring for others, you forget sometimes that you also have a right to be cared for. That truth had been hiding inside me, quiet and patient, until Ethan's whispered confession pulled it into the light. The next morning, I sat with my tea cooling between my hands, staring at the sunlight crawling across the kitchen counter. A decision was forming in me, as steady as a tide. If my daughter was planning my removal, I needed to know exactly where I stood. So, I called Charles Whitman. Charles had been my lawyer for years. He helped James and me when we bought our first house, guided me through the estate after James passed, and drafted my will after the stroke. He was the kind of man who wore the same brown leather shoes for 30 years and carried a fountain pen that had outlasted 2 secretaries. His office still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco, though he hadn't smoked in decades. When I walked into that office, it was like stepping into a part of my life that had not been stripped away. Charles stood from behind his oak desk, his hair now white, his handshake still firm. "Margaret Hayes," he said warmly. "It's been too long." I smiled, though my heart was heavy. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." "For you, always. Sit. Tell me what brings you." I sat in the familiar leather chair, the one I had occupied in better times. I folded my hands in my lap. "I need to know where I stand. With the house, with my finances, I need the truth." "Charles," not the polite version. He studied me over his glasses, then nodded slowly. "I wondered when you might come asking. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a thick file, and set it before me. Margaret, the house is still in your name. Entirely. For a moment, I could not breathe. But Kate's name is on the mortgage. Yes, because she contributes to the payments. But the deed, he tapped the folder, is yours. You never signed it over. You still have full legal ownership. I felt both relief and shame flood through me at once. Relief that I had not been erased. The shame that I had allowed myself to forget my own strength. Charles leaned forward. If you chose, you could sell it tomorrow. You could place it in a trust. You could even evict them, though I know you would never do such a thing. I shook my head. No, I would never put my grandchildren out of their home. But I need to know, if it comes to it, I still have a choice. You do, he said firmly. You always have. We spoke for nearly an hour. He explained trusts, powers of attorney, the steps I could take to protect myself. He never rushed me, he's never treated me as fragile. By the time I left, I carried not just papers but a weighty sense of possibility. Still, knowledge alone was not enough. I needed proof. Proof of what Kate had been planning. The whispers behind closed doors. The careful maneuvering I had begun to suspect. It happened one quiet afternoon. The house was empty, Kate at work. Richard, traveling. The children at school. I stood outside her office door, my heart pounding harder than it should have. I told myself I was only looking for stamps. She had mentioned once that they were in the middle drawer, but when I opened it, a folder caught my eye. Burgundy. Thick. Labeled in her neat handwriting. Estate planning. I knew better than to pry. And yet, something in me, instinct, maybe survival, told me I had to look. I slid the folder out and sat on the edge of her desk. The first page was my life insurance policy. Highlighted. Circled. Notes in the margin. Expires 2028. Verify premium. Confirm beneficiary. The next pages were glossy brochures for assisted living facilities, pastel-colored photographs of smiling seniors in staged lobbies. One had a sticky note attached. Mid-tier care. Ask about Medicaid conversion. My stomach turned. I flipped further. There was my will, printed and marked with annotations in Kate's handwriting. Property value, pension benefits, bank accounts, all with notes in the margins. Need access. If decline accelerates. And then I saw it. A power of attorney form, my name printed neatly, the lines waiting for my signature, most of it already filled out in Kate's hand. I sat frozen, staring at the evidence of my own erasure. This was no longer just whispered plans. It was preparation. My daughter was not waiting for me to ask for help. She was preparing to take it, to take everything. I closed the folder carefully, slid it back exactly as I had found it. Then I went to my room and pulled a manila envelope from the bottom of my box of scarves. With slow, deliberate hands, I labeled it in black ink. When they forget I'm still alive. I returned to Kate's office, copied every document, every brochure, every annotation, every note. The printer hummed steadily, spitting out the proof of what I already knew. When I was done, I slid my copies into the envelope and tucked it under my bed, between a tin of old birthday cards and my mother's quilt. Then I sat by the window with my cooling tea and whispered again. I am not finished yet. For the first time in months, the words felt true. That night, as I lay awake listening to the muffled sound of Richard's voice through the wall, Kate's hurried footsteps down the hall, the distant bass of Ethan's music, I felt something stir in me. It was not anger, though anger would have been justified. It was not sorrow, though sorrow had been my constant companion. It was resolve. I had been a nurse for 40 years. I had walked into hospital rooms where families were falling apart, where the worst news had to be delivered, where lives hung by a thread. I had stood steady then, and I would stand steady now. Kate thought she was planning my future, but she had forgotten something essential. I still had a say, and I intended to use it. The folder under my bed felt like a heartbeat, steady and insistent. Every night, as I slid between the sheets, I thought about it, the evidence of my daughter's plans, waiting in silence for the moment I might need it. But a folder, even thick with proof, is not the same as a path forward. Proof tells you what has been done to you. A path tells you what you can still do for yourself. That path came knocking one Tuesday afternoon, The doorbell rang, startling me from my nap. When I opened the door, I found myself staring into a face I hadn't seen in nearly a year. "Margaret Hayes," she said warmly, opening her arms. "You're a hard woman to track down these days." It was Helen Brooks, Dr. Helen Brooks, though she always waved off the title when it came from me. We had started as nurses together decades ago, pulling night shifts side by side, making split-second decisions in hospital rooms where lives balanced on the edge. Later, she went back to school, earned her doctorate in gerontology, and became something of an expert in aging with dignity. I had never been prouder than the day I heard her called Dr. Brooks. Now here she was, standing in my daughter's doorway, her gray hair cut in a sharp bob, her eyes bright behind her glasses. She looked, well, strong, alive. I ushered her inside, surprised and oddly grateful. "How did you find me?" I asked. "Your old neighbor, Mrs. Patel," she said. "You'd sold the condo, moved in with Kate. I thought I'd stop by." I felt the familiar prickle of shame. "It's Kate's house," I said automatically. Then, after a pause, "Well, technically it's still mine. It's complicated." Helen raised one eyebrow, the way she used to when she knew I was holding back. "Complicated. Sounds like we need tea." In the kitchen, I filled the kettle while Helen placed a paper bag on the counter. "I brought you something," she said. Inside were 3 ripe tomatoes, their skin taut and red, and a small pot of basil, its leaves glossy and fragrant. "I remembered you always grew them," she said softly. "Thought maybe you still did." The sight of them nearly undid me. My throat tightened as I touched the smooth skin of the tomatoes. "I tried," I whispered, "but they didn't do well here." She didn't press. That was Helen's gift, knowing when to dig deeper and when to let silence do the work. We drank tea at the counter, eating cookies I had baked that morning. We spoke of old colleagues, grandchildren, the small aches that come with age. It was almost normal. Almost. Then Helen set down her cup and fixed me with the same look she had given me countless times during those long hospital nights. The one that meant she was about to strip away all pretense. "Margaret," she said quietly, "how are you really?" I wanted to brush it off, to say, fine, the way I always did, but her eyes held me steady. And suddenly, the walls I had built around myself collapsed with alarming ease. "I'm invisible," I said simply. "I'm fading away in my own home." The words filled the kitchen like smoke. Helen reached across the counter, wrapped her warm hand around mine. "Tell me," she said. So I did. I told her about the candle outside my door, about the scones untouched in the freezer, about the folder I had found in Kate's office. I told her about Ethan's late-night confession, about the way Richard's eyes slid past me, about Emily's whispered embarrassment. By the time I finished, Helen's expression had hardened into something resolute. "You don't deserve this," she said firmly, "and you don't have to accept it." I shook my head. "What choice do I have?" "Helen, I'm 78. My body betrays me more often than I'd like. Where would I go?" Her eyes sparked. "That's exactly what I came to tell you. There is a place, not one of those depressing facilities your daughter is collecting brochures for, something different." She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, then turned the screen toward me. Photographs filled the small space between us. Cottages painted in cheerful colors, gardens bursting with flowers, people gathered around tables playing cards, a man walking a small dog along a shaded path. "It's called Horizon Gardens," she explained, "a co-op for seniors who still want independence, but also community. Everyone has their own space, a cottage, an apartment, but there are shared gardens, activities, comités. It's not a warehouse for the dying, Margaret. It's a neighborhood for the living." I stared at the pictures, feeling something stir in me I hadn't felt in years. Hope. "It looks lovely," I whispered. "A unit just opened last week," Helen said. 1 bedroom, private patio, south-facing windows. Reminds me of your old condo. I joined their board last year. I could help you apply." I swallowed hard. "Are you offering me a way out?" "I'm offering you a way forward," she corrected gently. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I saw it clearly, my own space, my own chair, in my own living room. Sunlight streaming through windows I could open without permission. A place where tomatoes could grow in the morning sun, where no one would leave a candle outside my door. When I opened my eyes, Helen was still watching me, steady and patient. "You don't have to disappear," she said softly. "Not unless you choose to." Before I could answer, the front door opened. Kate's voice carried down the hallway. "Mom, whose car is in the driveway?" Helen squeezed my hand once, then withdrew it as Kate appeared in the kitchen doorway. My daughter's hair was pulled into a tight bun, her blazer still crisp from the office. She blinked at Helen, then at me. "Oh," she said, polite but cool. "Hello, Kate. This is my friend Dr. Helen Brooks," I said. "We worked together at Memorial for nearly 30 years. Helen smiled, extended her hand. "It's a pleasure." Kate shook it briefly, her eyes already flicking to the tomatoes and basil on the counter. "I didn't know we were having company," she said, her voice edged with something I couldn't name. "She just stopped by," I said evenly. "Well," Kate said after a pause, "I'll let you two catch up. I've got a call in 10 minutes. She turned, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood. Helen waited until the sound faded upstairs before speaking again. "You see, she doesn't even ask." I nodded, my throat tight. Helen reached into her purse, pulled out a business card, and slid it across the counter. "Think about it. Margaret, call me when you're ready." Horizon Gardens could be a new chapter, not an ending. When she left, the kitchen felt too quiet. I picked up the tomatoes, held them in my hands. For the first time in months, I thought of spring. That night, I slipped Helen's card into the envelope under my bed. The folder had begun as evidence of what was being done to me. Now, it was also a seed of what I might still choose to do for myself. For the first time in a long while, I fell asleep with something like anticipation in my chest. I have always believed that preparation is a form of dignity. In the hospital, it was the way we laid out instruments before a surgery, the way we smoothed a patient's sheets before they returned from an X-ray, the way we whispered reassurance, even when the news was bad. Preparation said, "You matter. Your life matters. What happens next matters." Now, I prepared for myself. It began quietly, almost invisibly. A folded sweater slipped into the bottom of a suitcase, then buried again beneath the winter coats in my closet. An envelope of cash I withdrew from the bank in small increments, so no one would notice. A list, scribbled in my neat nurse's handwriting, tucked inside my bedside Bible. Call Helen. Call Charles. Pack quilt. Pack photographs. Each action was small, but together they felt like breathing again. At night, when the house was still, I would sit at my desk with a notebook and write down what I needed to take. Not just practical things, medication, insurance cards, a sturdy shoes, but pieces of myself I refused to leave behind. James's watch, though it no longer ticked. The recipe box with my mother's handwriting. The framed photograph of Kate at 7, gap-toothed and smiling. And the quilt? Always the quilt. My mother's stitches, worn soft from decades of use. It had warmed me as a child. Then my daughter, then my grandchildren. It would warm me still. Each time I tucked something away, my heart pounded like a schoolgirl sneaking out past curfew. Fear and exhilaration mingled in equal measure. I was 78 years old, and yet I felt, for the first time in years, like I was planning a future rather than waiting for one to be decided for me. Still, the guilt was a constant ache. Ethan would pass by my room, earbuds dangling, and give me a distracted smile. Emily would sometimes pause at the kitchen counter, fingers grazing the cookies I left out. Before retreating to her phone, I loved them both fiercely, with a love that did not diminish, even as they drifted away. To leave felt like betrayal, but to stay felt like erasure. One evening, as I folded laundry in the quiet of my room, Emily knocked lightly on the door. "Grandma." I opened it, to find her clutching a broken bracelet, beads dangling from a snapped string. "Can you fix this?" she asked shyly. I smiled, my heart aching. Of course, we sat together on the bed, stringing the beads back into place. She watched my fingers, then whispered, "I'm sorry I don't talk to you much. My friends, they don't get it." I touched her cheek gently. "You don't owe me apologies. Sweetheart, just time. And time will come." When she left, pris bracelet, repère. I sat staring at the door long after it closed. That night, I nearly tore up my list, nearly abandoned the plan, but then I remembered the candle outside my door, the untouched scones in the freezer, the folder of brochures with my name penciled across the margins, and I knew, if I stayed, Emily would learn from her mother that I was a burden. She would grow into a woman who believed love meant control, not respect. Leaving was not betrayal. It was teaching. So I continued. I practiced walking with my cane down the driveway, telling Kate I needed the exercise. In truth, I was timing myself how long it took to reach the corner, how many minutes before my legs trembled. I learned which buses passed by, memorized their schedules. I wrote down phone numbers on an index card in case my cell phone failed me. Charles Melavier became my silent ally. Over tea in his office, he explained how to place the house in a trust. This way, he said gently, your daughter cannot move forward without your consent. I signed the papers with a hand that trembled only slightly as the ink dried. I felt a quiet power settle into me. At home, I hid the documents beneath the quilt in my suitcase. No one suspected. Kate still bustled through her days. Richard still buried himself in work. The children still orbited in their private worlds. To them, I was static, unchanging, already fading. They had no idea that inside, I was gathering strength. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with doubts. What if Horizon Gardens wasn't what Helen promised? What if I grew sick, too sick to care for myself? What if Kate hated me forever? But then I would whisper into the dark, I am not finished yet, and the doubts would quiet. I began to imagine my departure, the way I once imagined patient discharges, calm, orderly, dignified. I would not shout, I would not beg. I would leave behind a letter, not as a weapon, but as a mirror, showing them what I had seen, what I had endured. And then I would walk into a life of my own, choosing. The plan crystallized one rainy afternoon. Kate had left for a work trip. Richard was at a conference. The children at school. I stood at the window, watching water streak down the glass, and realized the moment would come soon. I would wait until the house was empty. I would pack only what mattered. I would call Helen, and together we would drive to Horizon Gardens. Not a running away, a walking toward sunlight through south-facing windows, toward the smell of basil on a windowsill, toward a place where preparation meant life, not death. As I folded the last sweater into my suitcase, my hands steady, I whispered once more the promise that had become my anchor. I am not finished yet. The house had begun to feel like a stage. Every day, I played my role, the quiet grandmother in the background, while behind the curtain I was memorizing my escape lines. The suitcase under my bed grew heavier with each hidden addition. The folder of documents was now tucked into the lining, alongside the quilt and photographs. But with each step I took toward leaving, the air inside this house thickened. Kate had grown sharper with me lately. Her words clipped, her smiles brittle. Perhaps she sensed something shifting, though I had been careful. Or perhaps it was simply her stress. She had a major project at work, one of those smart housing developments she poured herself into. At night, I heard her pacing in her office, her voice low and tight on the phone with Richard. One morning, as I poured myself tea, she walked into the kitchen, glanced at my mug, and frowned. "Mom, have you been moving money?" she asked abruptly. The question startled me so much that I nearly dropped the teapot. "Moving money? Yes. I checked one of your accounts. The balance is lower." Heat rose in my cheeks. "I've withdrawn small amounts. For personal use." Her eyes narrowed. "Personal use. You don't need much here. We cover the groceries, the bills." I set down the teapot firmly. "I am still entitled to use my own money." "Catherine." She opened her mouth, then shut it. "I just worry, that's all," she said quickly. Too quickly. "With your health, it's best if things are monitored." Monitored. The word lodged in me like a stone. That night, I tucked the envelope of cash deeper into the lining of my suitcase. My resolve sharpened. Still, the guilt gnawed. Ethan lingered near me more often these days, though he tried to mask it with teenage indifference. One evening, I found him sitting on the back steps, staring at the rain. I joined him quietly. Big world out there. I said. He shrugged. Feels smaller when you're stuck inside all the time. I nodded. I know that feeling. He looked at me then. Really looked. You okay? Grandma. The question nearly undid me. I will be, I said softly. I promise. He didn't press, but he didn't move away either. We sat together until the rain stopped, a fragile truce against the silence that usually stretched between us. Emily, too, surprised me. One Saturday morning, she slipped into my room, holding a packet of seeds. I found these in the garage. She whispered, "Tomatus, want to plant them with me?" I stared at her, speechless. Before nodding, we knelt together in the damp soil behind the shed, our fingers pressing seeds into the earth. She chatted about school, about her favorite singer, about how her best friend had dyed her hair pink. I listened, my heart swelling with every word. When we finished, she wiped her hands on her jeans and smiled shyly. "Don't tell Mom." "Okay. She'll just say it's messy." I hugged her, the scent of earth and childhood clinging to her hair. Our secret. He promised. Moments like that made my decision both harder and clearer. To stay would mean more stolen afternoons in the garden, more quiet evenings with Ethan. But to stay would also mean allowing Kate's control to tighten until I was little more than a shadow in the corner of my own life. Leaving was not abandoning them. It was showing them that I still had a voice, still had worth. So I called Helen. Her voice was brisk but kind. "The unit is still open," she told me. "If you're ready, we can move quickly. The board knows your background, your years of nursing. They'd welcome you." "When?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Within 2 weeks, if you like." I closed my eyes. 2 weeks, 14 days, to shift the entire course of my life. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." From that moment, the world sharpened. Colors seemed brighter, sounds clearer. Each morning, I walked through the house and saw it not as my home, but as a chapter closing. The hallway where I overheard Kate laugh about my smell. The kitchen where scones cooled, untouched. The shed where my tomatoes once grew. All of it a museum of what had been lost. I moved with care. Each evening, I added one more item to the suitcase, a pair of shoes, a packet of photographs, a scarf Helen had given me years ago, always small enough to go unnoticed, but enough to carry myself into a new life. At night, I drafted my letter. It was not angry. It was not cruel. It was the truth, plain and steady, written in the same hand that had once charted patient vitals through long hospital nights. I wrote of my love for Kate, for the children. I wrote of the pain of becoming invisible, of the slow erasure. I wrote of my decision to reclaim my dignity. And then, at the bottom, I wrote one line that felt like both a warning and a gift. "The house is now in trust. You have 6 months to decide your next step." I folded the letter carefully, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it into the drawer of my nightstand. The days that followed were both heavy and light, heavy with the knowledge of what I was about to do, light with the thrill of finally choosing myself. On the last evening before my planned departure, I stood in the hallway and looked at the family photos on the wall. Kate's wedding day, Richard in his suit, Ethan as a toddler in the pool, Emily with frosting on her nose. I touched each frame, whispering a blessing as though I were the one staying behind. Then I returned to my room, closed the door softly, and placed my hand on the suitcase waiting beneath my bed. Tomorrow, I told myself, tomorrow the stage ends, and the real play begins. The night before I left, I barely slept. I lay in bed, listening to the house breathe around me, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the air vents, the faint thrum of music leaking from Ethan's headphones down the hall. Every sound felt amplified, as though the house itself knew I was about to leave it behind. At dawn, I rose quietly, moving with the slow precision of someone preparing for surgery. Every gesture mattered. Every movement carried weight. I packed the last of my things, folding each carefully, as though the fabric itself could sense the enormity of this departure. My nightgowns, soft with years of wear, the sweater James had loved, faint with his cologne, even after all this time, the quilt, folded neatly and placed on top as both shield and anchor. Beside it, I slid in the envelope of documents, the deed, the trust papers, the evidence I had copied from Kate's office, my protection, my proof. Then I picked up the framed photograph of Kate at 7 years old, gap-toothed and smiling. For a moment, my resolve wavered. That little girl had once believed I was the center of her world. She had pressed her paint-stained hands into mine, whispered secrets against my shoulder. Could that child still live somewhere inside the woman who had plotted to erase me? I kissed the glass, then tucked the frame gently into the suitcase. Finally, I placed the letter on the nightstand, exactly where Kate would find it. I had written it 3 times before settling on the version that now lay sealed in the envelope. It was not a plea. It was not an accusation. It was a statement. My love, my pain, my decision. At the end, in my neat nurse's script, I had written, I am leaving, because I must live. The house is in trust. You have 6 months to decide your future. Do not look for me with anger. Look for me with understanding. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment, letting the silence wash over me. Then I rose, lifted the suitcase, and opened the door. The hallway stretched before me, lined with family photographs, Kate and Richard on their wedding day, Ethan as a toddler, water wings puffed around his arms, Emily at her first ballet recital, each frame a reminder of a life I had helped build, a life from which I was now excusing myself. I touched each frame as I passed, whispering a blessing the way I had done in the hospital for patients who would never wake again. Not a goodbye. Goodbyes are final. A blessing carries forward. The house was quiet. Richard had already left for work. Kate was out on an early meeting. The children still tangled in their dreams. I moved silently down the stairs, my suitcase wheels bumping softly against the carpet. In the kitchen, I paused. On the counter sat a bowl of fruit, a plate of half-eaten muffins I had baked 2 days earlier. I almost laughed. Even in leaving, I was surrounded by the evidence of my invisibility. I set the kettle on one last time, brewed a single cup of tea, and drank it, standing at the sink. The taste was bittersweet, familiar, and final. Then I lifted my suitcase, opened the front door, and stepped into the cool morning air. The street was quiet, the kind of stillness that comes just before the world fully wakes. Birds sang from the telephone wires, and the air smelled faintly of cut grass. I walked slowly down the driveway, my cane tapping softly, my heart pounding with each step. At the corner, a car waited. Helen stood beside it, her sharp bob catching the morning light, her smile steady and sure. "Margaret," she said, opening the trunk, "you're ready." I nodded, though my throat was too tight for words. Together we lifted the suitcase, tucking it gently into the trunk. Before I slid into the passenger seat, I turned once more to look at the house. Sunlight glinted off the windows, making them flash like eyes. For a moment, I saw not the house itself, but the years it had held. James planting roses along the fence, Kate running down the stairs in her prom dress, Ethan splashing in the kiddie pool, Emily chasing fireflies in the dusk. It was all there, preserved in memory, if not in truth. "Goodbye," I whispered, not to the house, not even to them, but to the version of myself who had waited too long to claim her own life. Then I climbed into the car. The drive to Horizon Gardens felt both endless and immediate. The highway stretched wide before us, mountains rising in the distance, green and solemn. Helen spoke in her calm, measured way, telling me about the community, the morning walking groups, the book club, the weekly farmers market. I listened, but my mind kept slipping backward, caught between sorrow and anticipation. And then, at last, we turned onto a tree-lined road. Ahead, nestled among rolling hills, stood a cluster of cottages painted in cheerful colors, soft yellows, deep blues, warm whites. Gardens spilled over with flowers. A group of residents sat on a porch, laughing, their voices carrying on the breeze. My breath caught. "Horizon Gardens," Helen said quietly. "Welcome home." I gripped my cane, my palms damp, my heart trembling. Fear rose in me, sharp and sudden. What if I had made a mistake? What if I could not belong here either? But then I saw a woman my age, bent over a patch of tomatoes, her hands steady in the soil, her face lifted to the sun, and something inside me loosened. For the first time in years, I was not arriving as a guest. I was arriving as myself. The first night at Horizon Gardens, I slept without waking once. No muffled footsteps outside my door. No voices carrying through the wall. No sharp click of Kate's heels down the hallway. Only the soft hum of crickets outside my window, and the gentle rhythm of my own breath when I opened my eyes in the morning. Sunlight streamed through the south-facing windows, spilling across the quilt I had brought with me. For a long while, I lay still, letting the warmth sink into my skin. I could almost believe I was 20 again, waking in the small apartment James and I had shared when we were first married. The difference was this: the space around me was mine, entirely mine. The cottage was small, just one bedroom, a tidy kitchen, a living room with wide windows, but every detail carried a sense of welcome. A vase of fresh flowers waited on the table, left by the staff. The cupboards were stocked with basics: bread, tea, a carton of milk. On the dresser lay a handwritten note. "We're so glad you're here. Margaret, the Horizon Gardens community." I made tea, standing barefoot in my own kitchen, and for the first time in years I did not worry about whether I was in the way. The air smelled of basil from the small pot Helen had placed on the sill. When I opened the door to let in the morning breeze, I heard laughter drifting from somewhere nearby. I followed the sound. Outside, the garden stretched wide, a patchwork of flowers and vegetables tended by careful hands. Residents moved about at an easy pace, watering cans in hand, hats shading their faces, dogs trotting at their heels. It felt alive, not staged or artificial. A woman with silver hair, cropped close to her head, waved when she saw me. "You must be the new arrival," she called. I nodded, smiling nervously. "I'm Ruth," she said. Approaching. "Lived here 6 years. Retired music teacher." "And you?" "Margaret Hayes," I said. "Nurse. Retired." "Well, some time ago." Her eyes lit up. "We always need a good nurse around. Someone sprained an ankle at the walking group last month, and we all panicked like fools." I laughed, surprised at how easily it came. Ruth looped her arm through mine. "Come, let me introduce you." We walked toward a circle of chairs set beneath a shady oak tree. A handful of residents sat there, chatting over coffee. Ruth introduced each one. Harold, a former history teacher with a booming laugh. Clara, once a professional singer, who now led the community choir. Ben, a widower with kind eyes who tended the rose bushes as though they were family. They greeted me warmly, not as an obligation, but as if they had been waiting for me. Someone pressed a cup of coffee into my hand. Another offered a slice of banana bread. Conversation flowed easily about the weather, the garden, the upcoming book club. I listened, smiling, my heart swelling with something I had almost forgotten: belonging. Later, Ruth walked me back to my cottage. "There's a community dinner tonight," she said. 7 o'clock. In the hall. "Don't worry, you don't have to bring anything. Just come." When she left, I stood in the doorway for a long moment, the quiet pressing around me. For the first time in months, I did not feel invisible. People had seen me, spoken to me, wanted me there. And yet, beneath the joy, a shadow lingered. As I unpacked the last of my things, I set Kate's photograph on the dresser. Her 7-year-old smile beamed back at me, gap-toothed and innocent. My chest tightened. Would she find my letter today? Would she read it with anger? Or would she see the love woven through the words? I thought of Ethan, sitting with me in the rain, asking if I was okay. I thought of Emily, kneeling beside me to plant tomato seeds. The thought of leaving them still ached like a bruise I could not stop pressing. That evening, I dressed carefully for the community dinner, my pink linen dress, the one that had waited 5 years for an occasion. When I stepped into the hall, voices rose in welcome. Long tables were set with casseroles, salads, pies. People laughed, passed plates, pulled me into conversations. For the first time in a long while, I was not background. I was not a burden. I was simply Margaret. I ate. I laughed. I listened to Clara sing an old folk song that made the room fall silent. And all the while, I felt something unfurl in me, slow and steady, a beginning. Later, walking back to my cottage under a sky scattered with stars, I thought of my promise. "I am not finished yet," I whispered, and for the first time, I believed the world had heard me. The days at Horizon Gardens quickly settled into a rhythm. like a song I had always known but forgotten how to sing. Mornings began with the walking group. At 7 sharp, a small gathering assembled near the fountain. Ruth with her wide-brimmed hat, Harold leaning on his sturdy cane, Clara humming softly to herself. I joined them, my steps tentative at first, but soon steady. We walked the tree-lined paths, birdsong filling the air, conversation, easy and unhurried. "Did you know," Harold said one morning, "that George Washington never actually chopped down a cherry tree? Pure myth." Ruth rolled her eyes. Harold's mission in life is to ruin every good story. We laughed, and for the first time in years, my laughter rang out without fear of being too loud. Too disruptive. Afternoons were for the garden. Rows of tomatoes, cucumbers, beans stretched in neat patches, tended by careful hands. I found myself kneeling in the soil beside Ben, who showed me how to train the vines along the stakes. My fingers sank into the earth, cool and alive, and I felt something inside me root itself as well. "You've got a good touch," Ben said, his voice gentle. I smiled, wiping sweat from my brow. Years of coaxing seedlings on apartment balconies. It feels good to start again. Evenings often brought music. Clara's voice filled the community hall like sunlight, warm and golden. She coaxed us all into singing folk songs, hymns, even a bit of jazz. My own voice was rusty, but when I sang among them, I felt my chest expand with something I hadn't known I'd missed. In between, there were moments of small usefulness, a scraped knee from the walking path, a dizzy spell during gardening. Each time, people turned to me instinctively. "Margaret, you're a nurse. What do you think?" Their trust, their gratitude. It was a balm. I was not invisible here. I was seen, needed. Yet even as I built this new life, shadows stretched from the old one. One afternoon, as I watered the basil on my windowsill, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Grandma, Mom found your letter. She's mad. Like, really mad. She said you abandoned us. I told her you didn't. But she won't listen. She keeps saying, 'You'll regret it.' I just wanted you to know, I miss you." I sat down heavily, the phone trembling in my hand. Abandoned, the word cut deep. Was that what Kate truly believed? That by choosing myself, I had forsaken her? I typed slowly, carefully. "I love you, Ethan. Always. This is not abandonment. This is survival. Take care of your sister. I'll write soon." I stared at the screen long after sending it, my heart aching. That evening, during community dinner, Ruth noticed my quietness. "What's wrong, Margaret?" she asked softly. I hesitated, then told her. She listened without interruption, her eyes steady. When I finished, she laid her hand over mine. "Children don't always see the truth right away. Sometimes it takes them years to understand the courage of their parents. But you did what you needed to do. Don't let guilt drag you back into the shadows." Her words warmed me, but the ache remained. The next day, as I returned from the garden, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. Kate's name lit the screen. For a moment, I could not breathe. I stood in the doorway of my cottage, the sun setting behind me, the air thick with the smell of roses. My thumb hovered over the screen. To answer would be to step back into the storm I had left behind. To ignore would be to risk losing my daughter forever. I closed my eyes, my heart pounding. Then I pressed accept. "Mom." Kate's voice cracked, sharp with anger, trembling with something beneath. "What have you done?" Her words spilled through the line, heavy as stones. And I knew the next chapter of my life was no longer just about finding freedom. It was about facing the cost of it. "Mom, what have you done?" Kate's voice pierced through the phone, sharp as a blade, trembling with fury. For a long moment, I said nothing. My hand gripped the arm of the chair, knuckles white, as though bracing against a storm. I did what I had to. "Kate," I said finally, my voice steady, though my chest shook. "You abandoned us." She spat. "The kids woke up. You were gone. Richard is furious. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Do you know what people will think?" Her words tumbled out, rapid and harsh. Not once did she ask if I was safe. Not once did she ask if I was well. "I left a letter," I reminded her softly. "I told you why." That letter was. She choked on her own anger. "It was selfish. After everything I've done for you, after bringing you into my home, feeding you, giving you a place. I closed my eyes. Kate, I said gently but firmly, you gave me a room, not a place. You gave me shelter, not belonging. The silence on the other end was sharp. Then, her voice rose again. You're twisting things. You're making me the villain, when all I tried to do was help. Do you know how hard it's been? Balancing work and family and you. And this stunt, you made me look like a fool. Something in me cracked then. Not in anger, but in release. For years, I had bitten my tongue, softened my words, played the grateful guest. But now, for the first time, I let the truth step fully into the light. Kate, I said, my voice firm. I am your mother. I am not your burden. I am not a smell to be hidden, not a nuisance to be managed. I have lived. I have worked. I have raised you with every ounce of strength I had, and I will not vanish quietly into the background of your life. Not anymore. Her breath hitched through the phone, sharp and startled. For once, she did not have words ready. I love you, I continued softly, but love cannot erase me. Love cannot mean control. And if you cannot see me as more than a shadow, then I must step into the light myself. The silence stretched, thick and aching. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, the line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the blank screen. My heart ached with grief. But beneath the grief, a strange calm settled. I had spoken. I had said the words I needed to say. Whether she heard them or not was no longer mine to control. That evening, I went to the community hall for dinner. Ruth pressed a plate into my hands. Clara hummed as she set out silverware. Harold argued with Ben about baseball. The ordinary bustle of life swirled around me. And slowly, I felt myself steady. After the meal, Clara began to sing an old hymn. Soft and low, the voices of the others joined hers, weaving a tapestry of sound that wrapped around me like the quilt I had brought from home. I closed my eyes, letting the music lift the weight from my chest. Later, I walked back to my cottage under the stars. The air was cool, fragrant with roses. Inside, he sat at my small desk, pulled out a sheet of paper, and began to write. My dearest Emily and Ethan, I want you to know that leaving was not about leaving you. It was about finding myself before I disappeared completely. You are my joy, my hope, my tomorrow. One day, you may understand that sometimes love means stepping away, not staying, where you are not seen. I hope you will visit me here. I hope you will remember that my arms are always open. My love always yours. I signed it with a trembling hand, folded it carefully, and placed it in an envelope. Tomorrow, I would mail it. When I set down the pen, I felt the quiet of the room settle around me. Not loneliness, peace. For the first time in a long time, I belonged to myself. Life at Horizon Gardens had a way of pulling you forward, step by step, into the rhythm of living. Before I realized it, a week had passed, then 2. Days blurred together, not in monotony, but in a gentle cadence, each carrying its own small gifts. I found myself needed again, and that mattered more than I could ever admit. When someone scraped a knee during the morning walk, it was my hands they trusted to clean the wound. When Clara grew dizzy during choir rehearsal, it was my steady voice that calmed her until she caught her breath. When Harold complained of chest tightness one afternoon, it was me who insisted firmly, nurse to patient, that he be taken to urgent care. Later, he returned with a sheepish grin and a prescription, calling me his guardian angel. It wasn't dramatic, but it was purpose. I wasn't a shadow here. I was part of the fabric. In the evenings, after meals, we gathered beneath the oak tree outside the hall. Conversations wandered from childhood memories to politics, to the mysteries of aging. Ruth spoke often of her students, how she missed their eager questions. Ben told stories of his late wife, his voice soft but steady, as though speaking her name kept her near. Clara, with her laughter like wind chimes, admitted she sometimes feared losing her voice, the one gift that had always defined her. And me? I told them about the hospital nights, the way patients sometimes clutched my hand as if I could keep them tethered to life. I told them about James, about the tomatoes we once grew, about the quilt that had traveled with me from childhood to motherhood, to this very cottage. We shared, and in sharing, we stitched ourselves into one another's lives. But even in this new rhythm, the past pressed in. One morning, as I trimmed basil leaves for breakfast, my phone buzzed. A new message. The sender's name made my chest tighten. Kate. I hesitated before opening it, as though delay might soften the blow. But when I finally read her words, they struck hard. You've humiliated me. The neighbors ask where you are. Richard is furious. The children are confused. You left us without warning, like we weren't enough for you. How could you walk away after everything I've done? Do you even care what this has done to your family? I sank into a chair, the phone heavy in my hand. Her anger poured through the screen, hot and relentless. I read it once, then again, searching for even a sliver of understanding, but found none. The old me might have rushed to reply, to soothe, to apologize for wounds I had not caused, but the woman sitting in that cottage, the woman Horizon Gardens had begun to restore, knew better. I placed the phone face down on the table. My hands shook, but my resolve did not. That evening, I walked with Ruth to the garden. The sky blazed pink and gold, the earth warm beneath our feet. As we knelt to check the rows, my gaze caught on a small green sprout, pushing bravely through the soil. Tomatoes. I touched the fragile stem with gentle fingers, my throat tightening. Emily and I had planted seeds weeks before I left. Perhaps by now they had sprouted behind Kate's house too. Maybe Emily knelt by them in secret, watering, whispering to them. The thought steadied me. Life insists on coming through. Ruth said softly beside me. No matter how deep it's buried. I smiled through tears. Yes, it does. In that moment, I knew Kate's anger might rage like a storm, but storm pass. What mattered was the sprout, the small, stubborn insistence of life to rise again. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees, and whispered the words that had carried me this far. I am not finished yet. And the garden, vibrant and alive around me, seemed to whisper back, no, you are not. The days unfurled like pages in a book I had almost forgotten I owned. Each morning at Horizon Gardens carried a quiet invitation to walk, to sing, to sit in the sun with neighbors whose laughter wove a fabric of belonging. I found myself saying yes more often than I ever had before. Yes, to joining Ruth in the library for the weekly reading circle, where voices stumbled and soared over passages of poetry. Yes, to sitting beside Clara at choir, letting her coach me gently into harmonies I hadn't dared sing since James and I once hummed lullabies over a crib. Yes, to planting not just tomatoes, but beans and marigolds, letting my hands carry the memory of soil back into present life. The more I said yes, the less room there was for the silence of my old house. Ben, especially, became a steady presence. He spent hours among his roses, speaking to them as though they were old friends. One afternoon, he lingered nearby, watching him prune with careful precision. Why roses? I asked finally. He looked up, smiling wryly. Because they make you work for their beauty. Thorns first, blossoms after. Reminds me of marriage. I chuckled. And were you good at handling thorns? Not always, he admitted, his gaze drifting. But my wife was patient. She believed even thorns could teach tenderness. We sat in companionable silence after that, the air fragrant with blooms. I realized then how rare it had become for me to sit beside someone without the weight of judgment pressing between us. Ben did not look at me as a burden or a project. He looked at me as though I were simply present, and that was enough. Later that week, I found an envelope in my mailbox. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. Emily. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Dear Grandma, I miss you. The house feels weird without you. Mom says you left because you wanted to, but I don't think that's the whole story. I remember planting tomatoes with you. They're starting to sprout. I water them when no one's looking. It makes me feel like you're still here. Ethan says you're okay, and I hope he's right. I wish I could visit. I wish I could talk to you without everyone else being mad. Please, don't forget about me. I won't forget about you. Love, Emily. Tears blurred the words until I could barely see. I pressed the letter to my chest, the paper warm against my heart. I had feared that leaving would erase me from their lives, that Kate's anger would paint me only as the woman who walked away. But here was Emily, holding onto the thread, choosing to see me not as absence but as presence in another form. That evening, I sat on the porch of my cottage, the sky deepening into gold and purple. The letter lay open on my lap, the words catching the last of the sunlight. Around me, Horizon Gardens hummed with quiet life laughter drifting from the community hall. The scent of roses on the breeze, the soft clink of Ruth's wind chimes. And within me, something settled. I was not forgotten. I was not erased. The seeds I had planted in the soil, in the hearts of my grandchildren, were still growing. As the sun slipped below the horizon, I whispered into the twilight, I am here, and one day, they'll understand. The wind carried the words away, soft and certain, as though the world itself had chosen to believe me. I had thought my nursing days were behind me, left in the dim corridors of hospitals where the smell of antiseptic lingered like a second skin. But at Horizon Gardens, those years found their way back, not as burden but as gift. It started when Clara asked if I could talk to a few of the residents about managing their medications. We all get confused sometimes, she admitted with a laugh. Half of us can't remember if we've taken our morning pill. We could use your wisdom. I agreed, and a week later, I found myself standing in the community hall with a small group gathered around. I spoke about the importance of routine, of keeping a chart, of asking for help rather than guessing. Their faces, lined with years, but alive with attention, reminded me of my old patients, and for the first time in a long while, I felt that spark of purpose I had nearly lost. When we finished, Harold clapped me on the back. See, guardian Engel, he declared again. The others laughed, and for once, I laughed easily with them. That evening, Ben invited me to sit in his garden. The roses glowed pale in the moonlight, their fragrance drifting around us. He poured tea into 2 mismatched mugs and handed one to me. You know, he said quietly, people here already talk about you as though you've been part of Horizon Gardens forever. I smiled, tracing the rim of my cup. That's kind. Sometimes I still feel like a guest. He shook his head. No, you've given people back a sense of safety. That's rare. For a while we sat in silence, the night filled with the hum of crickets. Then he asked softly, do you miss them? Your family? The question pierced me, gentle but unavoidable. Every day, he admitted, even when they made me invisible, they were mine. My grandchildren. I ache for them. My daughter. I trailed off. Unable to finish, Ben set down his cup. Loving someone doesn't mean staying where you're diminished. You chose to live. That doesn't erase your love. His words lingered like balm, though the wound remained. Later that night, as I returned to my cottage, my phone blinked with a new message. A voicemail, Kate, with trembling hands. I pressed play. Her voice came through sharp, brittle. Mom, you've destroyed everything. Do you know what Emily said to me? She said she wishes she could live with you. Do you have any idea what that does to me? You've turned my children against me. You've chosen strangers over your family. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. The words sliced deep. I sat on the bed, tears spilling freely. For a long time I let the pain wash over me, the guilt pressing heavy. But then, through the blur, I remembered Ben's steady voice, Ruth's laughter, Emily's letter. I remembered the circle of neighbors singing beneath the oak tree, their voices carrying me when I could not carry myself. I was not alone. Not anymore. That night, instead of crumbling, I reached for a notebook, not to write a letter I might never send, but to write for myself. Today, I was called selfish. Today, I was accused of breaking what was already broken. But today, I also heard laughter, planted seeds, drank tea under roses, and remembered that my life still belongs to me. I am not finished. I am still writing. The words flowed, shaky at first, then stronger. When I closed the notebook, I felt a steadiness I hadn't known in years. The pain of Kate's voice remained, but it no longer defined me. My story was no longer only theirs to write. It was mine, and I intended to keep writing. It was a quiet evening when the knock came, soft, hesitant, almost afraid of being heard. I opened the door, and there stood Emily. Her hair was damp from the night air, her backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder, her eyes wide and nervous. "Grandma," she whispered. For a moment I could not breathe. Then I pulled her into my arms, holding her so tightly I feared I might never let go. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I took the bus," she said quickly. "Ethan helped me. He covered for me at home. I had to see you." I ushered her inside, closing the door softly behind us. She dropped her backpack and sank onto the couch, looking around the small cottage with wide eyes. "It's so cozy," she said. "It smells like you." I laughed through tears. "That might be the basil on the windowsill." She smiled. Then her face grew serious. "Mom's so mad at you," she says. "You abandoned us." "But I don't feel abandoned. I feel like you're the only one who still sees me." Her words pierced me, tender and fierce. I sat beside her, taking her hands in mine. "Emily, my sweet girl, I never left you. I left the place where I was disappearing. But you are part of me. Nothing could change that." She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. "I water the tomatoes every day. They're getting taller. I talk to them, like you showed me. I tell them you're proud of them." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "And I am more than you know." We sat together in the quiet, the hum of crickets outside the window. Then she asked, softly, "Grandma, were you scared? When you left?" I thought for a long moment. Yes, terrified. But sometimes, being brave doesn't mean you aren't afraid. It means you choose to move anyway. You carry the fear with you, and you walk forward. She nodded, her small face solemn. "I want to be brave like you." "You already are," I whispered. "You came here tonight, didn't you?" That took courage. We talked until the clock crept past midnight about her school, her friends, the songs she was learning on the piano. She asked about Horizon Gardens, about my friends, about whether I was happy. "I'm learning to be," I said honestly. "Happiness isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's a quiet room, a warm quilt, and someone who loves you enough to knock on your door." When it was time for her to leave, my heart ached with the weight of it. I walked her to the edge of the garden, where the street light pooled golden on the sidewalk. She hugged me fiercely. "I'll come again." Somehow, I kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, the sweetness of youth. "Even if you can't, we remember this. I am always with you, in the tomatoes, in the songs, in every brave choice you make." She pulled away, tears shining in her eyes. "I love you. Grandma, I love you too. More than the sky, more than the stars." I watched her disappear into the night, her small figure swallowed by the shadows. My heart felt torn open, half with joy, half with fear. I knew Kate would learn of this visit. I knew the storm ahead was inevitable. But as I stood in the garden, the roses whispering in the dark, I also knew this. A seed had been planted. Emily had seen me, chosen me, carried my love forward. And sometimes, one seed is enough to change the whole harvest. The storm came, just as I knew it would. A week after Emily's visit, my phone rang. "Kate." I almost let it go to voicemail. But something in me knew it was time. I answered. Her voice was sharp, trembling with fury. "Did you know Emily snuck out? She risked her safety. She lied." Her words tumbled, frantic and jagged. "She came to see me," I said quietly, "and I was grateful. You encouraged this." Kate's voice cracked. "Mom, do you understand what you're doing to my family? You left us, and now you're dragging the children into your mess. You are ruining everything." I held the phone close, my heart steady in a way it hadn't been before. "No, Kate, I am not ruining anything. I am showing them that life does not end at invisibility. I am showing them that love can exist alongside truth." Silence. For a moment, only her breathing filled the line. Then, softer, she said, "You made me feel like I wasn't enough. Like all I did was never enough for you." The words pierced me not with anger, but with sorrow. "Oh, Kate," I whispered, "you were always enough. You always will be. But you tried to make me less so you could be more. That isn't love. And I can't let that be the story of my last years." Her breath hitched. "I don't know if I can forgive you, and I don't know if I can ever erase the hurt," I said gently. "But forgiveness isn't today's task. Today's task is to live." For both of us, there was no goodbye, no soft ending, only the click of the line going dead. But this time, I did not crumble. This time, I let the silence stand as its own answer. That evening, I walked to the garden, The air was warm, the soil damp beneath my feet. I knelt beside the rows of tomatoes, their stalks taller now, leaves stretching toward the sun. I touched one gently, marveling at its resilience. A seed buried deep in darkness, now reaching upward, insisting on life. For a long time I sat there, the night humming around me, and felt the truth settle in my bones. I was not finished, not erased, not invisible. I was still here, still growing, still alive. When I finally stood, the stars were bright above the garden, and for the first time in years, I looked up at them without wishing for escape. I looked up, knowing that my story, however fractured, however unfinished, was still mine to tell. And as I walked back to my cottage, I whispered into the night the words that had carried me all this way. I am not finished yet, and I knew, with a certainty as steady as the earth itself, that I never would be. What did you feel while listening to this story all the way through? If it touched your heart, leave the number 1 inch the comments. If you didn't feel connected to it, feel free to write 0. Every piece of feedback means a lot to me, because it's thanks to you that I can keep going. It's from your responses that I draw the energy to tell the next chapter a new story is coming. Even deeper, even more moving, and I truly hope you'll be there to listen with me.